Hello friends, Will Davis Jr. here with your good news today, and it's all good news. Anytime you're in the Word of God, folks, it's good news. So are you enjoying 1 Peter? Are you reading 1 Peter? I'm really enjoying 1 Peter and hope you are too. Send me an email. Send me an email at seniorpastor, srpastor at acfellowship.org and tell me how you feel like 1 Peter's going. So we're in 1 Peter chapter 1, 20 and 21. I dealt with 20 yesterday. He was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but was made manifest in these last times for your sake, for the sake of you. 21. The sake of you, who, you, through him are believers in God. God who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and your hope are in God. I love how verse 21 bookends with you believers in God, and God raised him from the dead, so your faith and hope can be in God. The bookend of this verse and the conclusion of a section is our belief in God. So Peter calls his audience believers. It's not just an activity, it's a state of being. It describes their nature. He says, you're believers. And you believe because God raised Jesus Christ from the dead and made a statement about his power by doing so you could believe. He calls them believers. You are believers in God. So I just want to celebrate that today in you and in me. That as Christ followers, as elect exiles on this planet where we don't completely fit in, that which best defines us is that we're believers in God. We're not going to hang our hat on anything else. So Peter just says, look, let me call you out for who you are. You're believers. I just love that term. Those who believe. Those who choose to believe in a very specific thing. Now that thing which they hang their hats on is the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Remember, Peter eyewitnessed it. These guys did not, but they believed. They had faith that he raised from the dead. Friends, that still remains the greatest act in human history. It remains the greatest statement of authority in human history. It remains the greatest demonstration of power in history. And he says, you believe because Jesus was raised from the dead. And in raising him from the dead, he gave him glory. He exalted Jesus above everything. Every knee's going to bow, every tongue's going to confess. You believe because of that. You believe because you have rested your faith on something significant, the greatest act in history. So remember, friends, we get a lot of grief for being believers, and belief is written up these days as illogical or irrational, or for people who have their heads in the sand. It is not irrational or irresponsible to place your faith in the greatest act of power in human history, the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Now, these folks were making hard choices. They were going to prison. They were having their property confiscated. Some of them were being executed on the basis that the resurrection of Jesus was real. That's where their faith came from, and they were willing to stake their lives on it. Are you? Are you willing to stake your life on the reality of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead and the glory that God gave to Jesus in that? That's what makes us believers in God. And so he says you believe because of the resurrection, and because of the resurrection, your hope and your faith, he goes back to the beginning, are in God. I've been thinking a lot about our country lately and about what's going on around us. And I'm recording this a week or two out before you actually see it. I'm actually a few days ahead in my recordings, but I don't think the world's going to change so much between now and the time you view this that this won't be relevant. I'm worried about our country. And what we're learning, friends, through COVID and through all the other things going on is that we don't have a chance. We don't have a hope or a prayer without God. He is all we have. And Peter is talking to a group of people just like that. They are exiles. They don't belong on their planet. And it's like your faith and your hope are in the one who raised Jesus from the dead. That makes you a believer. So maybe you want to send an email to a Christian friend and just say, hey, I'm a believer today and I want to encourage you in your belief. Maybe you want to reach out across the room to somebody you work with or live with, somebody you're going to see today. Maybe you want to FaceTime or Zoom somebody and just say, you know what, I know you're a believer and I'm a believer too. Let's believe together. Let's put our hope and our faith in God. because that's good news. I'll see you tomorrow.